This event has actually been about 5 years in the making. When we first walked in this building, we set foot upstairs where our office is, and paint a picture. When you were upstairs, you had to be careful where you walk because there were holes that would take you all the way down to the basement. And we found this view, both upstairs and down here, when we envisioned it today. It took us until now to do it, between getting moved in, a pandemic. So thank you very much for attending. It's a very special day for us. Today's event is based on this notion that the world is changing. And when I say that, I think a lot of people think, okay, let's try this. You good now? Can everybody hear me without a microphone? Yeah. We'll try that for a minute. So the world is changing, right? And when I say that, I think a lot of people think to the here and now, the present, COVID-19. But all you have to do is look at the news and see yesterday we pulled out of Afghanistan after 20 years. Don't know if your mind goes to political events, humanitarian events with the hurricane, but we've been through a lot. I can remember 30 years ago when I started my career in IT, the only thing I was really concerned about was not spilling stuff on my keyboard. Maybe I knew what a virus was, but I don't know that I had found Norton yet. Although my first dog was named Norton after the utility disk he ate, and yes, it was a floppy disk. And then my only other big battle was working with management that saw IT as a necessary evil, and I had to arm wrestle them for budget dollars to get new computers. Well, here we are in 2021, and things have changed just a little bit. I think about what keeps me up at nights. I don't know if it's like you at all, but I think about what have we done as an organization to protect the client networks that we manage, or to keep people safe, to keep the data safe. Have we done enough? What is tomorrow going to bring? I dread Fridays. I don't know if any of you have gotten that call sometime on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, where we've got a problem with it. So often it happens somewhere between 12 and 1:30 in the afternoon that I don't know what to make of it. Are these people just out there wanting to come after me and my lunch hour on Friday? But all these events, these cyber events, are coming at us more and more frequently with more and more precision that put our data and our people at risk. The biggest challenge we have is ensuring that that last firewall, the last protectors of data, our employees, are prepared to do battle with the threat actors. That's why we're here today, to talk about what we can do to help get the employees in on how we protect organizations. Sound like a good topic for the day? All right. There's a couple cool realities that we like to set. First of all, your organization will have a cyber event. If you've not already had one already, you're due. And if you have had one, you're as likely, if not more likely, to have another one because now they know stuff about you. No matter what protections you've taken, they've tracked information about your network, your employees, your data. Humans make mistakes. I made one this morning in a comment to my wife about the puppy that we got to replace kids that were moving out of the house. I'm not sure I'm going to get dinner tonight. But we're all human. We all make mistakes. And there's been some surveys out in 2020 that looked at 1,000 employees in the United States, 1,000 in the United Kingdom. And 43% of workers admitted to having made mistakes that resulted in cybersecurity repercussions. 43%. That's assuming there was a group also out there. That's the people that admitted, right? There's probably a group that were too scared to say anything. The same report found that 20% of companies have lost customers as a result of mistakenly sending email data to the wrong person. Has anybody in this room sent an email to the wrong person? How doggone easy is it in Outlook to type in Bob and get the wrong Bob and put an attachment on it, and out the door you go? These are all examples of risks that come up because of our employees. And the only thing they're doing is being human. That's what we're here to talk about today as we walk through the event. I think we're going to start today with a Kahoot session. Is everybody familiar with Kahoot? First of all, everybody bring their cell phone. Everybody's sitting there looking at email, responding. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. There are two ways to get on Kahoot. One is to go to www.kahoot.it, or if you have the Kahoot app, you can type in this PIN, 4610478. Not to pick on the older folks in the room. How we doing? First time I saw this is when I took my first child to college, and I didn't know what it was. Everybody familiar with it? Get to the screen. Hey, here we go. We're up to 7, 8. Let's get it up to 20 and we'll start going. And people are bold enough to put their real name in there. That's cool. Let's go. First question, you get 20 seconds to put in your answer on the quiz, so be quick. Have you bought anything online using a company email or your company computer? Answer yes or no. 18 of you. I want to talk to the 4 that said no. Next question. Have you ever done something on your company computer that you were concerned to do on your personal computer? I'm not going to do this at home. I'm not sure about it, but I'll do it on my computer at the office. No. 19 no's. Wow. Okay. Question 3, have you ever hesitated to submit a support ticket about suspicious email because of the added costs or judgment by your IT team members? Wow. Okay. How long does it take your IT team to return your call about a possible bad email or cyber event? 15 minutes, an hour, next day, more than a day? Good. Last question. What is your first response to receiving a phishing email? Do you ignore it? Do you delete it? Do you forward it to somebody on your IT team? Do you call support? Delete it. Okay. Hop on. Did some of those questions resonate with you and things you think about in cybersecurity? The one that I always find interesting is the amount of times people use a computer that's owned by the business to shop. The other one is that we see in the support business, more often people will do things on their computer at the office that they might not do at home, or they might think is odd, because they know they've got support in the office, and at home they don't want to wreck their own home computer. Believe it or not. So today we're going to talk about the risks, right? And these are some general things that you probably already know about, but maybe might not have put everything together when we think about employees. First of all, falling for a phishing attack. These phishing attacks are where people send emails in that look real, are targeted at key people, and are getting harder and harder to pick apart. The most recent one is that we've worked on is an organization that had a domain that was registered on about the 5th of May, and on the 7th of May they were sending emails in, and they added one character to a domain name. Instead of a 1, which was in the name, they used an L. They looked exactly the same. Guess what? We were about an hour away from somebody clicking on and wiring $250,000. They're getting more and more smart, intelligent about the way they're going. And by them, I mean the threat actors, right? These could be nation states, they could be organizations here in the US, they could be kids in college having fun. More often than not, they are criminal organizations based outside the reach of the United States. That doesn't mean we can't do some things about it. Risk number 2, allowing unauthorized users to access a corporate asset or the network. I always have a lot of fun when I walk into the front of any of our organizations. My favorite contact is the person that is at the front desk. And it's astounding to me how when they put in a sub for a day, that nobody questions me when I walk in. I typically don't have a badge on, they don't know who I am, and they show me right into the conference room where I can plug my computer right into their network. Chances are, I'm going to get a hot connection to your network, and I can probably see your data. How many of you have HVAC systems that are connected to the networks so that you can control or have the convenience of controlling on your phone? Printer companies are notorious for plugging in their computers so you can print to them. But yet they send page counts, maintenance cycle information back to their supplier, yet they leave holes open on those systems, like Swiss cheese. Risk 2, allowing that unauthorized user access. Risk 3, poor user password management, and then poor use of privileged accounts. How many of you have a password manager that you use to store passwords? How many of you have a spreadsheet that is somewhere, or a notepad document listing passwords? You don't have to raise your hand. How often do we walk in as a support company trying to log into somebody, we flip over the mouse pad and find a post-it note underneath? More often than we care to admit, right? So that's kind of poor password management, right? So everybody's chuckling, they're seeing a story here. Other times, we don't do a good job at forcing people to have passwords of a certain length, or to change them often, or to not allow them to use race car 123 today and tomorrow use race car 456. Also, IT teams, individuals are really good at, oh, I'm hurried right now, I can't help you, let me just promote you to admin, and you can get in and do what you need, and I'm going to drive on. That happens more often than not, and that's the inappropriate use of privileged accounts. Risk number 4. Again, humans. Misdelivery of shared information. The email component always comes to mind, but how many of you use something like Google Drive or OneDrive to share data with people outside your organization? How many of you go back after that relationship has come to its logical conclusion and then turn it off? Or do you just leave things out there? That's the misdelivery of shared information. There's this also notion of risk number 5, which is employee fear apathy. A lot of times they just don't care. They don't understand their role. And if they see something, they need to be compelled to action. The fear notion is how many times I've seen managers get up in the meeting and say, you will do this, or you will face termination. I spent too many years in the Navy. I understand fear from a commanding officer, but it was never the right motivator for getting me in to do something, right? So this notion of employee fear, or just the apathy, is another huge risk. Lastly, lack of knowledge about an organization's response plan. Knowing what to do. How many of you know about your organization's response plan to a cybersecurity incident? How many of you read it? When was the last time it was updated? These are all core risks that exist in most organizations from an employee's perspective. They just simply don't know what to do. They haven't been provided the training. yes, they might do that annual little video thing, or yes, they might read something, but is that enough in today's environment? We have a board or a panel today. Come on up. Y'all gonna want microphones. Yeah, let's give it a shot. Stephanie, I'll let you introduce yourself. Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Eckerley, and I'm a partner of the law firm of Creek and Hall, and I'm excited to be here this morning. Fun to do an in-person event. And a lot of my practice focuses, it started in healthcare, so really the health IT field, focusing on HIPAA, and of course there's a ton of cybersecurity issues there, and breach issues, and then over the past few years, given the rise in cybersecurity incidences and just IT management and all the help that different industries needed, it's really expanded beyond that. So I'm excited to be here today, and thank you to Doug and Blackink IT for having us.
Good morning. I don't think I need the mic. If I use it, I'm probably going to be like, they're going to be heard, I don't know, downtown. I'm Shauna Nielsen. I'm from Gibson Insurance. So we've got an office here in Indy. We've got offices in South Bend, Fort Wayne, Kalamazoo, so we get around. I am the Director of Risk Management Services for Gibson. That's a fancy way of saying I'm a claims person. And so when these events happen, I'm the one that gets to help my client through them. And it's kind of, it's weirdly fun, but because we get to talk insurance, and we're geeks about that. So I'm also a licensed agent, so today my point of being here is to talk a little bit about the culture, what we do as a company to make sure our people are able to report incidents and things like that, but also talk a little bit about how insurance may end up responding to an event in the unfortunate event that you have it, and hopefully you do have insurance for the event. So that'll be a takeaway today too. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm Kat Edmonds. I work here at Blackink IT, sales and marketing, and I'm going to help this in the panel. So I think the first question we have for you guys is really about this culture of see something, say something. And Shauna, do you want to talk a little bit more about how you guys focus on that at Gibson? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things about culture, I mean, culture is that word that everybody throws around, right? What we've tried to get to is do you have a company where if the CEO, in quotes, if the CEO sends an email that says, I need you to buy $2,000 worth of Amazon gift cards and give me codes, are your people going to do it? Are they going to email the CEO back, the CEO, and say, oh, do you really want me to do this? Or are they actually comfortable enough to either pick up the phone and call the CEO? Do they have the CEO's personal cell that they can text him or her? And I'll tell you, Gibson is a place where we can do that. Our leadership team has made it that we know how to get a hold of our executives. Now, we could, of course, contact IT and have IT check it out, which is fine, but we wanted to create that culture that people aren't afraid. They're not afraid to ask that question. They're not afraid of their CEO or their COO or whomever you might be thinking about. And that's what we see happen with clients a lot, is the people have fallen into these schemes because they're terrified of their executives. And so it's what sort of a culture is your company embracing and putting out there for your people?
What's one way you guys have been able to go on one
Hey, Kat, I think you guys do need to use the mic.
Yeah.
All righty then. This is going to be louder. Put it down. Is this not? You going to repeat all that? I don't think.
Do you want to repeat the question then?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
You guys want to pass this one?
Maybe we'll pass it.
See, I don't hear this one.
I know I did myself.
So the next question, so I was talking about see something, say something. And Shauna, the follow-up question to that is, do you have an example of a way Gibson is promoting that culture, one way you guys have done that?
Is this coming through? Because I don't hear it up above.
Is it? then move on.
Okay, so we'll play past the mic. And we won't spit on it because COVID. So one of the things that Gibson does is we do, our IT team does do the simulated things. And actually we just got congratulated by our IT director, what day is this? It's Monday, it was. Because only 2 people out of 165 actually fell for the last phishing attempt. So that was excitement. As a director and as a person who manages people, I've gotten that call that, hey, it was your team that clicked it, and to Uber's point, I want to be like, what the heck? But it was more about, okay, why did you think you could click that? Why weren't you thinking through it? And so that's the things that we do is we're constantly putting it in front of our people. We also do the security training right now. I've got a thing that keeps popping up, hey, don't forget to do your required security training. To go through about phishing alerts and things like that. But we're talking about it all the time. I mean, it's a constant talk about that. Be alert, be aware, make sure that it makes sense. And I think that's what's driving it for us.
And Stephanie, what are you seeing based on maybe some cases or scenarios you guys have had in which this, see something, say something, didn't go through and it caused that attack?
So, I agree with everything Shauna said about the training. It really starts at the executive level. And with training, you need annual training, you need training when you onboard, but I think the most important training is, like you said, that periodic training, monthly reminders, the emails. Our firm business, I get really excited when I pass the test and I call and they're like, no, that was a phishing email we sent out intentionally, so it's always kind of a fun day when that happens. So from our end, I would say the biggest things we're seeing are phishing emails. It is just one of the biggest ones. I had a client in the healthcare industry send me an email one time asking me to review a document. So and it was from their actual email, but I clicked on the document and it asked me to enter my company's credentials to be able to open it and review. So I called, and of course they're like, no, we didn't send any document, and they literally went to their sent items and could see the hacker, and they're sending this out. And had sent out hundreds of emails that then clients had clicked on and others, so it was somewhat of a disaster. But it was just that training, right? You really have to do it. The other thing is not doing a really strong security risk assessment is probably the number 2 thing I see. So we had another client who had devices and, a couple things, and they had we done a security risk assessment, or had they, right, then they would have realized that, okay, not all the devices are password protected, and then some of the apps on there are also not password protected, and the way they were using these and allowing employees to take them home without passwords being on them could be problematic. There's another really good one. It was, I think, a $1.2 million settlement with Affinity Health Plan. Kind of a silly one, actually, to think how easily it could have been prevented. But they returned copiers that had a hard drive with protected health information on it. And one of the big findings from that investigation was those copiers were not part of the risk assessment, so they weren't even thinking about having to delete those hard drives. So those are 2 really big, I think, probably what we're seeing the most of that can probably prevent is the training on that. And then the third thing is termination of employees from an HR perspective. I think one of the biggest risk areas is when you terminate an employee and you don't cut off that access prior to that termination meeting. You would think people would never be a bad actor, but it happens. So.
Thank you. And then Boomer, one question we had from the registrant was, how can we help employees understand that technology will not solve the human side of cybersecurity? How can we help employees understand that technology will not solve the human side of cybersecurity?
We share a lot of stories, right? And okay, I'm being told microphone. Can you hear me now? We see a lot of this in real time, and the stories are simply, I asked the Kahoot question about, have you ever ordered anything? One of the biggest phishing things that is going on right now is, hey, your delivery was delayed, click here. So if you allow people to buy stuff in the office, it's logical that they might get something like that. And they have this belief that IT has put in all these safeguards. It's going to prevent them from going someplace bad. but yet, here we go, we'll click on. So helping them to understand their role and not be fearful is really the first step, right? It's making them aware. I'm raising teenagers. I try to be very transparent about poor decisions I've made in life in the hopes that they won't repeat them, right? Why don't we take those same parenting skills into the office to be able to share with teams what's going on in the networks so that people hear the stories and might resonate with them. So I think it's an openness to be able to share, to raise that collective awareness of this has happened in our office, it happened last week. These are the stories that need to find their way in order to help people understand they have a role.
Can I add to that? One of the things, and I don't know how many people here are responsible for people, managing people, but I've had to deal with terminations and things like that where I'm then in their email, and I'm amazed at the number of people who use their business email for all their personal junk. I mean, their bill stuff is coming, and all the shopping stuff Boomer's talking about, and it's, I mean, if anything, I would encourage you to, your company email is for company business. It's just amazing, and even school, because people think, oh, I'm in that email all the time, so I'm going to give the school my company email. But all of those things can be hacked and get in there, and it just creates that openness that I don't think companies should be allowing.
Yeah, and company email is not private, so like people don't like attorneys, and this is probably why. Tell your employees that you're going to look at their email. You know, I mean, you can look at their sent items. If you have an employee that you think is, you know that there's issues there, you know they're violating company policy, that's okay to do. And I think it's it feels like an invasion of privacy, but we really encourage companies when they onboard new employees to make that very clear, and you can have them sign like a user policy or confidentiality agreement that they're not going to share their password, and that they understand there's no expectation of privacy with their work email. That they also should not be sending text messages with confidential company information. I mean, that's another really big area that we see. And then from a company perspective too, just really driving home the point that, we say all this, and I sound like a total jerk right now, but also remind them that there's no retaliation for reporting, because we see a lot of times, and it's the 4 o'clock on a Friday. That was my first ransomware matter I ever handled, and we were up almost all nighters, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, trying to figure out how to make Bitcoins over the weekend. It was kind of crazy, but in that instance, immediately this employee called, like the second they realized that there could be a potential issue that they were involved in, and because of that, there was so much the company was able to do forensically to stop it. So, telling your employees there's no privacy with work email, but also reminding them you're not going to retaliate just for telling them. You want them to tell immediately, because it may be nothing, but if it's something, there's a lot that the tech people can do to stop it, or at least make sure that they're mitigating it as soon as possible.
So we talk about, say you do put into that, say it does happen, what's next? Can you talk a bit more about what is an incident response plan and what that would look like?
Sure. How many of you, I quickly saw a set of hands, how many of you think your organization has a response plan, or you know what to do next if you encounter something, just by raising your hand? As I shared, I dread Fridays because that's when we get the phone calls. But having that knowledge that something has occurred so that you can then pull together the team of executives, technology people, finance people to sit and understand what has just occurred. If Fridays and Saturday mornings seem to be when these happen the most. And if you think about it, most of your senior team members, especially in the summer, might be taking a portion of Friday off. So being able to get to people that are empowered to pull everyone together. In the most recent event, I got a phone call at 12:55 that said, there's a phone call at 1 o'clock, you need to be on it, we had it. We knew then at that point who we had to pull together because we had talked about it beforehand. When you're guessing and you're trying to make it up on the fly, it gets really difficult. That first hour trying to assess what has occurred and to track factual information, not what you think, but what you know, is going to be key. And the trick is that it doesn't typically just take the first hour. And the last event, we went until about 11 o'clock that night. So from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. almost constantly in conference calls to understand the root issue. So it's understanding the first step and then the steps that are going to go after that are key to that incident response. I'm going to pass it to the attorney because I know she has comments.
Thanks. So if you guys want a really good resource on this, Department of Labor just came out with cybersecurity guidance in, I want to say, April 2021, and it was the first time that DOL came out with anything for plan fiduciaries and risk of fiduciaries. So that was a really big moment for me as an attorney, maybe not for everyone else. But it was interesting because, you think about healthcare entities or covered entities and business associates, and we've got SEC rules on this. But most employers have, a lot of employers have self-insured health plans, right? And so this applies to self-insured health plans. And so they have some really nice guidance on the incident response, but you said it best, know your team. Have that team assembled from the beginning. So you're gonna have executives, legal, forensics, IT infrastructure, like who designed your system, they need to be on it, in addition to who can do the forensics on it, PR, we've had hospitals that are we going into diversion mode? Do we know who's coming in for surgeries? We've got payment processing that we've got to shut down. So just understanding, what could be impacted. I'll make a shameless plug for any attorney. Attorney-client privilege is really important here because if you look at the penalties that are coming out, like Myriad, the GDPR one, I forget what the settlement was. It got finalized in October, but it was huge, right? And you've got, go to HHS's website and you can literally not just see the settlement agreements, but there's a database of all the breaches. Indiana AG has one too. So these all resulted in monetary penalties, or a lot of them, not all. And so when that happens too, if you're going through it and you see, oh, my employee did this, my employee stole data, the attorney-client privilege is going to be critical then, so make sure you know who the legal team is on that, and that goes to insurance too, because most policies are going to require you to use a certain law firm, but some policies allow you to write in a law firm, and we've seen issues too where we're kind of, the client's fumbling around because they're trying to figure out who's panel counsel, right? And so have someone even in the interim that can fill that gap. Law enforcement is a really, really big one. The FBI has a great field agent here in town. If you guys want contact information, we would be happy to help. And I feel like a lot of times people are scared to call in law enforcement because they think, oh, they're going to be investigating our company. No, they want to find out who in, I'll just say Russia, right, is behind it. And they know so much when you get into these huge ransomware attacks. It's really cool if you get any insight into what they're doing, how they track IP addresses. Insurance, one of the key ones. We've also seen it where, because of the ransomware attack, literally the client can't get onto systems and they can't find their policy and they can't find the number to call. So have your incident plan printed out, have that insurance number right there because they have great forensics that will hop on within minutes, and they're nationally known players too, and they can connect with you. I'm going to stop talking and pass it on. I feel like I'm rambling. So.
Oh, great. She took my insurance plan. No, it's critically important, and I'll tell you, in these events, people tend to forget about it. In general, when people have a bad event, they tend to forget about insurance. They call their attorney first, which is great, and a lot of really good law firms will be like, hey, do you have insurance for that? You might want to call your agent. But the things that Stephanie's talking about, you get a breach coach if you have a policy. The important thing here, and this is not a plug for insurance, so please don't take it that way, but your standard insurance policies are not going to cover this. You have to have a cyber policy. And it is getting harder. It used to be that cyber policies were really, really cheap, really, really easy to get. But to Boomer's point of that 4 o'clock on Friday call, incidents are getting more abundant, they are more severe, they're costing more money. So we are seeing the market harden on cyber insurance as well. The insurance companies, when they first got into this, were like, hey, it's no big deal, a couple $1,000, and yeah, we can throw these coaches at you, and they're great coaches. Now we're seeing where we used to be able to get 10 quotes, we're getting 10 declinations in one quote. And it comes down to that incident response plan that we're talking about here. It's risk management, just like any other thing that you're thinking about risk management in your company, having driver policies and things like that. If you don't have a good policy, if you don't have a good plan, if you don't have good security measures around your IT infrastructure, it's going to be harder to get the policy that I'm talking about. And this incident response is not cheap. Law firms, and I'm not picking on law firms, they charge by the hour, right? So, and then pretty much, I mean, we all know that. Then you add in the PR firm, you add in the breach coach, you add in all of these things, you're getting into tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this isn't even talking about fixing the problem. This is how we do the damage control on the problem. So really, really important to make that call. I always suggest you call your attorney first for that attorney-client privilege. They're going to be telling you, hey, do you have a policy? Let's find it, let's get it going, and then working together on that.
So one more thing, before you even get to the response plan though, you really need to do, and we talked about it a little bit, that enterprise-wide risk assessment. I'll tell you, people call me a lot and they're like, hey, can you help me with my incident response plan? I'm like, okay, like before we even get there, what data do you have? Where is it stored? What laws govern? If it's personally identifiable, information, where are those people located? Are they in Europe? Are they in Brazil? What states are they in? Who would want it? How would they get it? What's the likelihood and impact? So before you even get to how do you have that incident response, you need to take a step back, right, and see where is your data and what data do you have? Because I feel like that's a key piece. I've seen people try to do incident response plans without actually knowing what laws govern. So then when the incident happens, we're scrambling to try to figure out, like, okay, we have people in 30 states. What states? Do you know what the timeline is here? And so we're just working against the clock then.
Thank you. So the next question I have is, what are other tools we might be able to put in place to mitigate or reduce the risk, such as, password management? So we want to speak about that.
Can we hear today if it works? So first of all, there is ongoing cyber awareness training, right? So that's the first one. Hopefully all of you both there. Hopefully everybody in here has a plan with some kind of tool like that to raise awareness, and that they're using that tool at least on a quarterly basis. The second thing is an awareness of your network, having information about what's there, so that you understand as equipment comes in from that. It's going to be part of your assessment, and it should be done immediately to help identify where some of the challenges will be. The third one is updated network diagrams of your environment. How many of you, probably not a lot of tech people in the room, but your IT team should have some up-to-date diagrams and how that data flows through so we can very quickly assess and understand. That then needs to go back to your staff and your employees and say, hey, is this where you're storing data? We had an event yesterday where there was a share that was created for training by an internal training department that people found out they could start putting information in. And they just started putting more and more data there. And they didn't know about, we didn't know about it until they wanted something back. So these things just happen. But being aware, having those controls in place are very key. The fourth one is a vulnerability scan. Going out and having someone go out and look at your network internally for vulnerabilities. From that point, you're looking at not only the computers, the servers that are connected, but the printers, the phones, the security systems, the sound systems, audio visual. All of these are connected to your network and can be threat vectors that would come in. So those are some of the tools that are out there.
Yeah, I would add to that, but don't just think about what tools you're using, think about what tools your third-party vendors are using. So a lot of us, right, are using a cloud to store data on, or we're, if you're a healthcare system, you have an EHR company. There's a million people who have access to your data. And so you need to be looking at your own tools, but you really need to be vetting your vendors too to see what tools they're using. So are they encrypting the data? at rest and transit over email, do they have SOC 2 and high trust CSS certification? If you've got a vendor who is storing PII, PHI, credit card numbers, and you ask them if they have a SOC 2 certification or high trust, and they say, what is that? That's an issue. And we've seen that, right? Or you ask them to provide a copy of the cybersecurity policy and name you as an additional insured. So just, we have a vendor vetting form we actually use and advise clients to use. So it's not just yours. You're seeing a lot of breaches that are being caused by the people that have access to your data and who are storing your data too. And I also think that there's always going to be a hacker out there that's super smart, organized crime. That's really what it is. And so we may not be able to prevent everything, but showing that you made those efforts by doing your risk assessment, vetting your vendors, having your insurance, having a plan in place, mitigating right away. Those are what the regulators are also going to look for when there is an issue. And when you look at a lot of these cases, there was one with St. Louis University where an employee was a victim of an email phishing scheme of about 3,100 individuals. And in that one we had social security numbers, dates of birth. However, HHS did not impose a finer penalty there because they notified the FBI, notified everyone, implemented all these safeguards. It was one of those it happened, but they took all the right steps. So one of the better stories there.
I don't think we really have a ton to add to that. It's all that awareness and being around. We haven't talked about thumb drives though, have we? No, thumb drives. Anybody had that panic before? I did. So it's amazing that stuff, and then you start thinking about what's on that thumb drive. So just throwing that one out there. But Boomer's got something on thumb drives.
Some of you might use a tool called KnowBe4, and it is the industry leader for cybersecurity awareness. And a lot of times you use it for phishing and maybe some videos. But one of the modules that is in there is a USB key test. And what we end up doing is creating little USB keys with a spreadsheet that says payroll for the organization that we're working with. And we leave those keys laying around in break rooms, plugged into a general access computer. And what happens is when employees grab that thumb drive, they're human, right? That's the theme here. They're inquisitive. They want to get it back to the person who left it there, right? And the minute they see a spreadsheet that says payroll, I'm sure they open it to find out who the author is, right? And so that happens a lot. Yeah, thumb drives are
Yeah, it's really awful.
yeah.
Stolen laptops. That's one of the biggest ones we see. So I literally did not leave my laptop in my car because my worst nightmare is it being stolen, even though it's encrypted and all this other stuff. I'm assuming there'd be no breach, but make sure stolen laptops, stolen iPads, and then the worst is when you have a stolen laptop that does not have a username and password, or the hard drive could be removed and it's not encrypted. And think about too, if someone breaks into your office, literally smashes the window and steals your laptops, do you know that you have the right password and encryption where you're not going to be reporting a breach? Because that's what we've dealt with a few times, and it's kind of scary because it's like they were in an office that was locked and there was a break-in. So you would think, this isn't the employee that leaves it, at Lowe's on the shelf, we've had that, or in their trunk, or their teenage son takes it to school and happens to leave it there because his computer was not charged, So if there is a break-in in your office, what security do you have where we're not going to have to be worried about that is another big one.
And then finally, as I look at the desks out here, there's something that I see on everybody's table. And when we asked you to install an app, not a single one of you stopped and said, but why? You all have cell phones. Most of those cell phones are probably owned by you as the individual. Yet they tie to your company's network in some way. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's through different aspects of Microsoft 365, or you can get into Gmail and Google. But those phones are connected in different ways now. Are your employees obliged to tell you when their phone gets stolen or lost? Or when they get a new one, what steps are they taking to wipe the data off of it that might be there? These are all big things that really you need to talk with your employees about kind of policies in place to manage.
Awesome. So kind of the final question or overview is, with cyber attacks on the rise, what can we expect to see
5 years, or we should bring awareness to in the next 5 years?
Everybody's going to have the FBI agent on their speed dial, and I know
Super nice.
he's wonderful. As a society, we're going to have to look for those risks and be creative, right? I can sit up here and tell you horror stories. The one I haven't told you about is an organization that came in and started putting job postings on an HR portal. And they held interviews for a company that they were not associated with and got people to submit resumes and data. Right? How unique is that as an attack? And the trick was, yeah, we did get to the FBI, but that also kind of drifted over in the United States Secret Service and some other groups. So these attacks are going to keep coming at us in ways we've never thought of. And it's not going to be perfect, right? We're, as technologists, as attorneys, as insurance companies, we're not going to be able to stay ahead of the threat actors. But what we can do is begin to help people to understand if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right, say something now. My father used to invite me to the kitchen table when I misbehaved because it was a safe place to have the discussion before I would find out what my punishment was, right? And I would start a lot of meetings with my clients about welcome to Boomer's Kitchen Table. It's a safe space to have the discussions. There's no question that is stupid when it relates to cybersecurity. Engage in those discussions, have a safe place. Now, Dad would take me outside and let me know that I lost the car or all sorts of other things. But have that safe place for people to talk, to stay aware, and be open, share what's going on. The IT team can tell stories, whether they choose to or not. It's up to you. But I think if they do tell the stories, it raises the awareness of really what's going on.
Okay, everything he said. And then one other thing we haven't talked about that's just like, not so much a kind of global, but a small thing is, why are you holding so much data? That's a really big one we've seen with a lot of our clients, right? They'll have records going back like 15 or 20 years, and they have no legal obligation to have that. So they'll have tons of social security numbers, and we've only got to retain those for, let's say, 7 years or 12 years, tax records for so long. Sometimes there are reasons to retain records longer, but in some of the security incidents we've been involved in, it's like we should have never had that data in the first place. We should have never had all those scanned files. So really looking at, again, that initial risk assessment. But like Boomer said, I think this is coming. There's no way to stop it. So it's just being really prepared and transparent with your organization.
Well, I already said it, but when we're talking about the insurance marketplace, to have a policy to deal with your breach response, we're seeing 100% to 200% increases now. In worst case scenarios, we're seeing 300% increases. Underwriters are looking for the controls that you have in place, so all the stuff that we've been talking about. Do you have the multi-factor authentication, network monitoring, closing the RDPs? You're doing the employee training, are you using the cloud, have you vetted out your vendors, all of these things. All of these things are what they're looking at, and if you can't answer the questions the right way from an underwriting perspective, you either aren't even going to get the policy, or you're going to be paying a lot more for it than you should be. So it's as we look at, cyber insurance has probably been around, just a few years, 4 or 5 years. It wasn't that big of a deal. But with these attacks on the increase, and they're constantly coming, and they're getting more and more severe, it's going to get harder and harder to get the insurance to cover it, or it's going to get more expensive. So having everything buttoned up and all your ducks in a row, if you will, are going to help you from that perspective.
I'm mindful of one thing as I sit up here. Insurance has been around for a long time, right? The last time I checked, attorneys have been here, I think, ever since we sailed across the Atlantic, right? IT is a relatively young vocation. You think about it, and when you went back to get your first computer, mine was back in 1983. So relative to the two professions to my mind, we're still young, we're still learning. And these things are going to continue to go on. So creating that culture of openness and learning and awareness is the only way you're going to combat today's threats and tomorrow's.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys being here, and we're excited to see what you do in the future. So thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to flip it over to one more slide. What can you do as you walk out here today from what we talked about today, right? So the first thing is incorporate cybersecurity in every discussion. A lot of times cyber becomes this quarterly, semi-annual, or annual discussion, but yet my suspicion is you as team leaders, managers, owners, have meetings with your staff on a routine and regular basis. How do you incorporate this topic in a fun way in every conversation you have? Leverage a cyber awareness tool. There are a lot on the market. All three of us can point you in the right direction to buy one if you don't have one. But those awareness tools do everything from phishing to training videos to the whole USB thing. There's also something called phishing, right, where people call in on the phone and attempt to strong arm and get into your network or get credentials. Get one of those tools. Have your team share cyber events. IT people don't like to talk, as a rule, right? Go back to Bob and Tom. Introverts look at their shoes, extrovert looks at your shoes, right? That whole notion that IT guys and gals, we have vitamin D deficiencies, we don't like to talk. And when we talk, we don't use terms or phrases or stories that resonate. Find a way to get them to share the stories. This notion of a recruitment site being used as a way to get personal information was a new one by me. I mean, I've heard certain things, but to see it in action is amazing. And that helps your employees understand what might be going on out there and the risks. Review your incident response plan. I think we've identified that this is really a trigger to do other activities, right? If you don't have one, take it to your next management team meeting and say, how are we prepared? What do we need to do? Call anybody on this panel, talk to your IT team about doing that security assessment, risk assessment, as soon as possible in order to get started. Because chances are you're going to need it sooner than you think. And last, promote a culture of see something, say something. As my dad ages and just turned 90, I have found the relative merits of the family table, right? The boomer kitchen table to have conversations. Find a way to have those conversations with your team in a safe way and empower them to help you protect your systems and your data. Thank you all for coming to this event. As I said, it was 5 years in the making. We appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions you might have from the floor or let you all go